Good morning from the greenhouse. I can't believe I get to say that. It still doesn't feel real. I am probably like 85% moved in to the greenhouse. It's about exactly where I wanted it to be at this point in the season. So I thought I'd go around and give you a tour of that, as well as the garden beds, because we're in the middle of planting out everything. We just had our last frost yesterday, so we get to start growing again. I have some really beautiful new beds to show you. And I also thought we would talk a little bit about where to put a greenhouse. I am gonna put the link down below for Hometown Structures. They're the ones that built this greenhouse for me. And they're really, really helpful if you have any specific questions you want answered about building your own custom shed greenhouse like I have here. But yeah, come on inside and I'll show you what's going on. So one thing that's been really important to me as I've been filling out this greenhouse is I always wanted it to continue to feel accessible and be less of like a full-on she shed and more functionally pretty. So you'll see I have zones of prettiness and zones of functionality, and I'm just gonna kind of take you around and show you what we've done so far. Starting with the doorway, Hometown Structures has a lot of different ways that you can configure the door. I did a double door here. This side does open. I have it closed right now because it's just not that warm right now. I did end up adding some mosquito netting here, and there were a couple of different ways I could have done a screen door or something in here after the fact, but I decided to do this because it was both cheap and relatively pretty. So I just installed a really basic curtain rod with these that pull across, and of course these can blow around, so I also have these door stoppers here that are weighted that I can use on the bottom to keep everything in place. I got my doormat. These doormats I have in the house too, actually, and they last forever. These are the recycled Water Hog doormats from LL Bean. I feel like you know you're really old when you get excited about a doormat. This is kind of like my tool rack. I've got a bunch of things hanging here. I've got the wasp deterrent because the first day I did have a wasp come in here, and literally ever since I installed this, it's just hanging on a coat rack, and ever since I put that in here, I have not seen a single wasp trying to make a nest inside the greenhouse. And I had this vintage dresser forever. I found it for free on the side of the road. This is kind of like a special skill of mine. I'm very good at like finding things on the side of the road. So I haven't finished like styling this out. It kind of just keeps changing as I'm doing stuff, and obviously I usually have flowers there, but the drawers themselves are just a disaster zone, like as they should be. That's what they're for. But I'm just keeping all sorts of like odds and ends in here. Extra bits that are seasonal. That one's empty still. Things that I just don't need access to that often. And if you were here when I was just talking about getting the greenhouse the first time, I did mention that this whole wall is gonna be kind of more like the functional workspace. And one of the things that I really, really love about the Hometown Structure greenhouses is that they give you that flexibility where like a normal glass greenhouse, you kind of are pretty limited in what you can do in it. In this greenhouse, it really has become a workspace, a studio, so many things, and even has like a cute little hangout corner for me, which I'll get to in a second. So right now, this is what I have for the desk situation. I love this desk. It's a vintage desk that I sourced a long time ago. And of course, we have to have our cleavers water. Amy from In the Cottage Garden turned me onto this, and I have to say, if you can find these, I'm obsessed. Cleavers are everywhere right now, and they're the ones that stick to your clothes, and it tastes like cucumber water kind of. It's just very, very refreshing. So this area, I will say, is going to get more and more fleshed out. But for the time being, where it's busy season and planting, I'm quite happy to just have my desk and all my tools set up right there. I did get my hanging chair, which has been a dream of mine forever. Finally have citrus trees. These are from Stark Bros. I bought them myself, they're not gifted. This is the Meyer lemon. This is the Calamandin orange, which is kind of like a kumquat. So as you can see, the ceiling of this is half solid and half clear. And there's a really important reason for this. So we're trying to capture passive solar. Let me put this down. Normally in a greenhouse, we're dealing with a lot of temperature extremes. And when we're talking about where to put a greenhouse, making sure you're paying attention to exactly where the sun is in position in the sky is really important, not just during the summer, but during the winter too. So I've actually positioned this greenhouse in a very specific way in order to get the most amount of sun exposure in the winter and the least amount of sun exposure in the summer. So the sun is actually going to be mostly over the solid side of the roof during the summer, and that's really important because greenhouses get super hot. And so this will actually help to regulate the temperature just a little bit and keep it a few degrees cooler in here during the hottest parts of the year. Now in the winter, we positioned it so the south side is going to get the most exposure from the sunlight during those times of the year when it's coldest. So if you remember back from when I built the hoop house, I've actually oriented this in exactly the same way. If you have the opportunity to position your greenhouse on an east to west axis so that the longest edge is getting the fullest exposure to sunlight, it will stay warmer in the winter. So talking to my cold climate gardeners specifically here, this is a big consideration if you're trying to grow food in a greenhouse even in those colder months. I should be able to follow the same exact practices that I use to grow food in the unheated hoop house all winter long in this greenhouse as well, because I've managed to position it in this way and add all this extra insulation, because Hometown Structures really lets you customize it to exactly how you want it to look and add all that extra insulation. So the solid ceiling is insulated, the solid wall behind you is insulated, and the floor is insulated. And speaking of the floor, I know I promised you an update and a part 2 on me painting this, because my plan had initially been to stencil it after I painted it this beautiful green color. And the reason that I ended up doing a part 2, stay tuned for part 2 on that video, was a couple of things. First of all, we had some really, really bad weather and I just wasn't able to get out here and finish it in time to post that video for you. And second of all, once I finally did come out here with the stencil and get started with it, it was a complete disaster. It would have been so pretty. The thing is, with like a plywood floor, obviously it has more texture, and I was experiencing difficulty getting like clean straight lines, and it was just turning into this really tedious project where I had to be like, is this worth my time? And in that moment it wasn't. Painting the floor actually wasn't my long-term plan. It was kind of just like, what can I do to get in here as fast as possible and get growing? Long-term, I think it would be really great to do something a little bit more durable in here, but honestly, the plywood that they put down is pressure treated, so even if it gets wet, it kind of just like curls up, and then as it dries out, it smooths back out. And the paint that I use in here is exterior floor paint, so it's extremely durable. I've already got lots of water and dirt on it, and it's been totally fine. You've also given me some great suggestions for getting water run in here, and I'm going to tell you why that's less of a priority for me, and it comes down to location in terms of the outside of the greenhouse. This is another consideration. As you're planning the location of your greenhouse, where your water source is coming from is just as important as it is when you're planning where to put a garden. You can see that I have my external water spigot right here. I actually ended up mounting my hose reel right on the side of the building, and what this means is that I can easily pull this out to the length that I need and walk it inside to water my plants. So yeah, in terms of location, I do think considering the sun and considering your water access are going to be the most important features. Of course, it's nice that it's also really close to my house, so I can just take a few steps outside and be right here. We also get a prevailing wind off of that field that pushes right through these doors, and I can open up these windows too, and it just sucks the air through, which makes it much easier to regulate the temperature in here. I made a joke on Instagram the other day that every time I leave the house, I end up coming back with more plants. It's just because it's that time of year. A lot of these are seedlings that I started indoors by myself, but I say about 50% of them ended up coming from my local farm. I did end up just doing these folding tables here. I really like these. They're totally wrapped and waterproof, but even if the top eventually goes, I found out that they have these screws right here, so I can remove the top and just replace it and continue using the leg frame part of it. It's just like got that new car thing going on, where it's like the first scratch is gonna hurt the most, but I want it to be used. I want it to feel like a space where like things are happening and not just like a sterile environment. At the same time, I am a very visual aesthetic person, so I'm trying to give myself the best of both worlds and also make it feel like something that you can achieve, which is why I'm going to absolutely no effort to hide this mess from you, because this is real life. This is what I need to do my job, to do gardening and to film it for you guys, and it's honestly not that bad. So a lot of these plants are going to go outside, but let's talk about what I've got growing here right now. I'll show you what I'm planting out. We'll also talk more about what it is that I plan to grow in here throughout the whole summer. I'm kind of calling this the year of the peppers because I just keep ending up getting more peppers. I think I got 5 banana peppers the other day. Yeah, my favorites, my snapdragons, portulaca, impatiens. I actually prefer double impatiens, but this is all I could find. Shishito pepper, cayenne pepper, cubanelle pepper, and then I'm doing a whole bunch of cuke starts for my trellises. This tray is a little bit experimental because generally speaking, I don't recommend starting cucumbers as transplants because their roots are very delicate. You can get lower yields. I just just found that last year they had a really hard time taking off when I direct sowed them. So I'm doing this as an insurance policy. I'm starting some inside and I'm going to be direct sowing some as well. And I did the same thing with my melons. Typically you would only start a melon indoors in a really, really short growing season. And I'm in a short growing season, and I have had issues in the past where they're just starting to ripen as our first frost is coming in. So again, this is just an insurance policy, and I'm gonna do a little bit of direct sowing and a little bit of transplanting with these. But I did lemon cukes, market more cukes, suyo cukes, which were my favorite last year. My aunt grew those and I had to have them. Waltham butternut, and then the okra had awful germination. I don't know, you're really not supposed to transplant these, but half the ones that I put in, they'd get trapped. Do you see this? They get trapped in their little seed pod, and I can't seem to do anything about it, and then they just rot immediately. I've never had that happen before with anything. This is a honey pot. My cantaloupe didn't have great germination either. These monsters are Lakota squashes, and these need to go into something larger because they just keep quadrupling in size every single day. And I just planted some more lettuce in this yesterday. Marigolds, and then I have all my dwarf indeterminate tomatoes. So we've got lemon ice, Rosella, Brandy Fred, and Blazing Beauty in here. I was planning to grow 12 tomatoes. I have 23. I call that a win. I think I showed restraint. Eggplants here from Burpee, some peppers. These are Aurora peppers, so they ripen from like yellow to orange to red to purple. So I was really excited about this because I keep saying I wanted to add more purple to the garden this year. This is my diamond eggplant. This one's very cold hardy and does well in our climate. This is like an orange bell pepper. I am doing some millionaire eggplant. Here, the ginger is just starting to sprout. This has taken the longest time. I also have this Kalanchoe catgrass going and a ton of Swiss chard. I already transplanted a bunch of it out, but oh my gosh, look. They just put so many in here. I'm almost worried that it's stunting the growth. I probably shouldn't have this fan directly on the eggplant because eggplant in particular is very sensitive to wind, but I'm kind of putting it through it because I got a terrible yield of eggplant last year, and I just need to know that these plants are gonna produce. So we're really trying to acclimate them to the environment. No matter what I do, it's going to get warm in here because I don't have any like climate control other than venting as an option right now. Pretty confined to doing stuff that's not gonna mind a little bit of heat. So for the summer, the plan is primarily things like eggplants and peppers. I want to do scarlet runner beans and have them grow up and overhead. Obviously, I have the citrus in here. I have been trying really hard to not be so strict with my garden plans this year because a lot of moving parts have been happening and things have been changing really rapidly in the space that I do have outside too. And obviously, growing in a greenhouse is a new experience for me, so I'm kind of showing you what I'm learning as I go. I really do want to try growing a melon in here. I think it could get really chaotic really fast, but I'm kind of excited about that, to be honest. But I started 4 artichokes over the winter in January, and right now only 2 of them survived because I had to put them out early so that they could get that kind of false winter, and they ended up getting too cold in certain points when I was away in California. And I'm gonna put those in here and see how they do. And that is why I have these huge containers, because realistically, if I'm gonna grow an eggplant or a pepper in here, it needs 3.5 gallons minimum to do well. So I've got mostly 3.5s. I have some 5s, but honestly, these are even bigger than I really thought they were gonna be. Don't mind my charger in there. So I'm gonna take you outside because we have some planting to do, and while we're doing it, I thought I could give you a tour of the 5 new garden beds that we just added as well. Hands down, one of my favorite design decisions I made with the greenhouse was not to put windows on either side of the door. We were discussing it, but they were gonna end up being really small, or I was gonna only have like 1 window. And I actually really love having that solid wall space because I was able to hang these sconces, and I was able to really frame out the greenhouse with these green stalks, which I just think looks so good here and adds some much needed color. It's just a really beautiful sanctuary for me so far. I've been out here every single day, and it's a space that has already gotten so much use and so much love, and I can't wait to see how it fills out once we get the rest of the plants going in there. But these are the 5 new beds that we've added. I've got 2 veg trugs and I have 3 of the cedar short beds from Epic Gardening, which I can link for you guys. And the best part about these beds is that because they have this beautiful finished top edge where you can rest your garden beverage, rest your tools, and keep working. The perfect height. So the right comes up right to my hip level. There's absolutely no bending. I've tested now 3 different styles of these elevated beds, which I think are super important for people with chronic pain like me, because the bending is like the one thing that like knocks me out every time in gardening. So to have something that's like the perfect height and has a place for me to rest things, it doesn't get better than that. The Thirsty Earth system we installed a couple weeks ago is going strong. These beds right now, all I've got in them are my King Richard leeks, my Tokyo scallions, some lettuce, and I think this is arugula. This is where all my tomatoes are going. Don't ask me how. Somehow I've figured it out where I think I can get 10 tomatoes in each of these 2.5 by 6 foot beds. Is it gonna work? I don't know. These beds are gonna be kind of a mishmash of a bunch of different things. Obviously, I just have cold season stuff in here right now, so I've got Swiss chard, lettuce, and broccoli back there. But I am doing a bunch of seeds in these beds that will start coming up. So I really wanna have trailing stuff coming down them to add more color, because I wanted the greenhouse to be this kind of beautiful classic blank slate so that the plants could really shine. So I want like nasturtiums coming off the sides and even some squash trailing down the sides, maybe even amaranth. Because one thing that I've learned is that the more flowers I pack into my veggie gardens, the more veggies that I have. One thing that I'm really excited about with the greenhouse is it's going to make succession sowing so much easier for me, because I can constantly be starting new seeds inside to have lettuce to put out and things like that to fill in these gaps, because last year I just wasn't that great at keeping up with things like that, and it ended up having all these empty spaces I just didn't know what to do with. We were also able to position the greenhouse in such a way that I did have this extra space here for more planters. So I put the grow bags in. These are the only grow bags that I recommend. They're recycled plastic and they're food safe, which a lot of like the cheaper grow bags are not food safe. So right now I've got cabbages in most of these and some snapdragons along the back, but it's cool because the water runoff from the roof actually trickles down and waters them for me. Fire pit area is still a work in progress, but I just feel like having this fire pit with the plants and the sconces on the greenhouse, it creates such a cozy vibe. I let my kale go to seed. It's so pretty, and I actually like ate these earlier and they taste just like broccoli. So I think we're gonna do some planting, and maybe I can give you some tips along the way, and you can just hang out with me while I get some planting done. I've never seen anyone do this before, and maybe there's like a good reason for that, but I can't think of one, so I'm gonna try it. When you're planting carrots, most of the time people have difficulty with germination because the seeds are so tiny and they have to be sown directly on the surface, and they have to stay consistently moist while they're germinating. And so there's a lot of different methods people use to cover them up. Last year I used a wood board, and I found that mildew or mold or something was developing underneath it because it wasn't very breathable. And I know people use like burlap, and I could see that being really effective. I don't have any, I have cardboard. So I don't see why this wouldn't work to just put the seeds under the cardboard. Oh, I think that's a little volunteer tomato. That's so cute. Just gonna kind of loosen up the soil. The top always gets so crusty. I need to come up with a mulching solution over here because these beds are just potting soil. I can't do any of my usual methods. So carrot seeds, if you don't know, and I'm sorry I'm all over the place today. We're not doing a whole carrot video, but they're super duper tiny. Meg is always saying just chaos sow them, and I just have not been able to bring myself to do it. But today I'm gonna chaos sow, but I'm gonna chaos sow in kind of a row because I just want to know if this cardboard method works. If it, you know, I'm gonna probably start just throwing carrot seeds everywhere like she does, and like they're on their own. They need to just figure their own stuff out. But we're gonna try the cardboard and see if it's actually effective, because I feel like a lot more people have some cardboard around than a piece of wood or some burlap. These are Danvers carrots, by the way. Let's see if that's effective. Lettuce is one of those things that I will stick just about everywhere until it's too hot. But as with any seedling that you're multi-sowing in a cell, being really gentle with it when you're separating it out. And the inclination is actually to grab it by the stem, and I do that fairly often just out of habit. But I'm trying to break that habit because the leaves are a lot tougher than the stem. And so if you can actually pull it by that instead after you've loosened the root ball, it's a lot better for the plant. Now lettuce is fine, like it's not a very delicate seedling. But if you were dealing with something like a cucumber, for example, and you were transplanting those, you'd want to be extra careful. We got our marigolds in, we got our snapdragons in, I have lettuce, I have carrots in. I'm gonna try direct sowing this okra because it really did not like being started inside. I don't know what the heck happened there. Just do a few, we'll see what happens. All right, my friends, that's it for today. Thank you so much for gardening with me, and happy growing.